This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Tuesday edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show live in the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the show, Kevin McCormick, our Sixers beat writer for 97.3 ESPN.com. He will join us as he is live at the center tonight. Doc Rivers is speaking around 6:15, so when Kevin joins us in about 34 minutes from now, we are going to get the immediate up-to-the-date news on the Sixers. Right now, the only guy on the injury report is Joel Embiid. So we expect everyone else to be available to play tonight. So we'll get any updates on the lineup and everything from Kevin coming up in about 34 minutes from now. Of course, the text board is open as well, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. We got some Eagles news to get to. We also got some other bits of information to get to as we go on throughout the show. Again, Sixers basketball tonight at 8 o'clock, not 7, 8 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN, where you can listen to Tom McGinnis on the call. Great conversation with Mike Gill and the one and only Tom McGinnis earlier in the day. We'll get to some of Tom's comments in just a bit. But we got to start with this Eagles news that came out about 30 minutes ago. And to some, this might not seem very relevant, but I'm going to explain to you what makes this relevant, okay? So, the report came out by Ian Rappaport just under 30 minutes ago that the Eagles have given Zach Ertz permission to seek a trade. Now, what's interesting is that the evolution of this story has gone from, remember, months ago, it was the Eagles and Zach Ertz were talking about a contract extension. Neither side could come to an agreement. Zach Ertz got injured. Zach Ertz supposedly was unhappy with the situation as it was negotiated. Then, when the offseason came around, the idea was the Eagles are going to move on from Zach Ertz. They're going to get something in return from him. Then the reports were that the Eagles, their asking price was too much. Now the story has turned to the Eagles are giving Zach Ertz and his agent permission to go out and look for a trade. And Mike Garafolo of NFL Network followed up on the Rappaport tweet with this tweet. Still comes down to the Eagles agreeing on trade compensation. But this step means Zach Ertz's agent can massage the entire deal. Ertz wants it done. Team wants proper compensation. So for anybody who thought that Zach Ertz was going to be back next year, this pretty much seals the deal. This pretty much closes the door on that. And the reason why this is relevant is because when you think about the situation in Philadelphia, we know that the moment they drafted Dallas Goedert, the idea wasn't that they were going to get rid of Ertz. The idea was they were trying to make that 2 tight end, 12 personnel, and amplify that, and potentially keep Dallas Goedert from going to the Cowboys. Remember, the idea was the Eagles traded ahead of the Cowboys to steal Goedert from them. Well, now that Goedert has proven himself to be a more than competent tight end, he's actually showed himself to be a better blocker than Zach Ertz is at the tight end position. Now we have a guy who can definitely fill the void of Zach Ertz. And without Carson Wentz here anymore, you don't need Zach Ertz to be the security blanket. You know, Ertz and Wentz were close. They were good friends, all that. You don't need him here anymore if you have confidence in Goedert being the primary tight end. And for the Eagles to turn around to Ertz and say, listen, go ahead and look for a trade. I think the Eagles realize that they have a window to get this deal done. And they're going to let Ertz and his agent dictate how that window plays out. Because look what's going on in free agency. The Patriots scooped up 2 tight ends in free agency, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. So now you have the Titans and the Chargers both out in the cold without their tight ends last year. Now, obviously, Hunter Henry is he's a much bigger name than Smith is, but in terms of popularity, people able to play fantasy football and stuff like that. But you have two teams now that are without their number one tight ends. You have other teams in free agency who are not going to have a chance at those guys because the Patriots locked up those two before the official start of free agency. So now Zach Ertz becomes the guy for the teams that either lost out on the tight end sweepstakes or for the teams that lost tight ends in free agency. So, for example, if you're a team like the Chargers or the Titans, do you call about Zach Ertz? Do you talk to his agent to see what you can do? You heard John Clayton talk about it about 30 minutes ago on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. Obviously, Seattle is out there, right? Seattle is out there. They're not going to trade Russell Wilson, it looks like. So how do you make Russell Wilson happy? You add him more weapons, right? So Zach Ertz can fit that mold. If you are a team, for example, like the New York Jets with Joe Douglas, who has familiarity with Zach Ertz from being in Philadelphia, do you try to make a deal? How about the fact that Pep Hamilton is with the Houston Texans? Do the Houston Texans get involved in trying to get Zach Ertz? Because Pep Hamilton was at Stanford when Zach Ertz was at Stanford. So there's a lot of places that he could go. It's not just because of tight end. Now, I know what people will say, look, why would you trade for Zach Ertz when you can maybe get a guy like Kyle Rudolph in free agency? The reason why you do it is because you have a guarantee that he's walking in the building. And no offense to guys like Kyle Rudolph, Ertz has a much less injury history than a guy like Kyle Rudolph. He's not as injured as often as Rudolph has been. So you have a guy outside of a couple small instances who doesn't have an injury history. He had a down year last year. You know he can still be productive. Maybe he just needs a fresh start. I remember, and I know it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but I remember what happened at the end of Tony Gonzalez's career when he went to the Falcons. And people assumed that Gonzalez was, pretty much over the hill and he wasn't the same guy he used to be. He got to revitalize that Falcons offense. He became a monster because now all of a sudden teams aren't focusing only on him. They got to watch out for Julio Jones and if Roddy White was there for a bit. So you had those three targets, and if you're an NFL defense, you're like, well, what do I do? So if Zach Ertz goes to the right situation, he can really be revitalized if he looks around maybe and sees Seattle and looks across the field and he sees DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on each side of him. Or if he goes to a team, I'm just throwing it out there, like, for example, the Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, hello. I mean, come on. You don't think Josh Allen would love to have a guy like Zach Ertz up there in Buffalo? There's a lot of places that he could go that would make a lot of sense. So this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out because now you're going to see the teams that are not going to land a tight end in free agency who are going to be calling for Zach Ertz. So that's the latest news I want to get you guys in on and the impact of that and that information. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Obviously, the NFL free agency news has been absolutely wild. Speaking of the Texans, they just signed Tyrod Taylor. So there's another guy that is no longer available for the Eagles' backup quarterback position. Jacoby Brissett is going to Miami. So some moving parts there. The backup quarterback position is changing. It's evolving. It's not going to be what you thought. So really quick on both of those situations. The Tyrod Taylor to Houston thing really does feel like an insurance policy because Deshaun Watson does not want to be in Houston anymore, right? So if Deshaun Watson wants out, and let's say you're a team like the Jets, and you're probably going to include Sam Darnold in a trade for Deshaun Watson, or if you are a team like Chicago that struck out on trying to get Russell Wilson, according to the reports, they went all in on trying to get Russell Wilson. It didn't work out at all. Seattle was just like, go away. So do you now refocus your attention on Houston to try to make that deal? And what do you get in return in that situation? So there's a variety of different ways this can go. And I feel like Tyrod Taylor going to Houston is an insurance policy for whoever they end up with, whether it's in the draft for the Texans or it's via a trade, like I said, with Sam Darnold in Deshaun Watson trade, that you at least have a veteran that can stand there. Brissett is a very different situation because remember, last year, multiple times, not just once, multiple games, Ryan Fitzpatrick came in to be the closer when Tua was having struggles. And you have to wonder, Brissett is not old, all right? He's not a guy who is up there in age. He's a guy who knows he can start in the NFL. He has had success as a starting quarterback. I have to think that a guy like Brissett, who's 28 years old, he turns 29 at the end of the year, does he go down to Miami and does he try to outplay Tua? Does he try to go down there and be like, I can still play in the NFL? Because Tyrod Taylor's going to be 32 next NFL season. So I think Tyrod Taylor understands that the best days of his career are behind him, but he can still be a very good functional quarterback for a team in the NFL. Brissett is still in his 20s. You have to wonder, for a guy like Brissett, does he look at the Eagles situation and say, I want to be a starting quarterback? Well, the owner wants the team to not have a quarterback competition. He wants the team to build around the quarterback. So when you think about it, is it a situation where the guys who are not coming here is because they know they don't have a chance to compete for the starting job? I wouldn't be surprised if there's a quarterback controversy down in Miami. People really underrate Jacoby Brissett. I'm not sitting here saying Brissett's is elite quarterback, all right? Don't get it twisted, all right? Relax out there. But Brissett has been a very functional NFL quarterback. He's shown you two different times, in 2017 and 2019. He is a guy who is reliable. He's not the greatest efficiency. He's not the greatest passer, but he's not going to turn the ball over, right? He's not going to put you in a situation to fail, all right? The guy literally has 13 interceptions in his entire career. 13 interceptions on almost 1,000 pass attempts. I'm sorry, but that's really, really good. I know the completion percentage is not sexy for his career, but 13 interceptions on 983 pass attempts is incredible. And if you think about it, if you're going down to Miami, maybe you look at Tua sideways and you're like, I'm coming in here to steal your job, young man. I didn't go to Philadelphia because I know that they don't want a quarterback competition, but maybe I get that quarterback competition in Miami. Same thing with Tyrod. Maybe Tyrod's looking around and being like, I don't want to go to Philadelphia because I know I don't have a chance to be the starting quarterback. But if I go to Houston, hey, Deshaun Watson might be out of there. They might draft the quarterback. They might trade for Sam Darnold. Me versus Sam Darnold. I like those chances. By the way, same with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick is walking into Washington. I don't care what the reports are. There is no reality where Taylor Heineke is beating out Ryan Fitzpatrick, all right? Don't give me that garbage. Oh, he's going there to compete for the job with Heineke. Taylor Heineke is a step above TJ Yates, all right? He's a guy who could be the backup, and if you need him to start, he won't lose you many games, all right? That's who he is. Ryan Fitzpatrick is arguably, from last year, if you take all the starting quarterbacks in the NFL last year, you could make the argument that he might be a top 20 quarterback in terms of what he's capable of doing. At worst, he's maybe 22nd. So who am I going to take? If I'm stuck on a football team and my only options are Taylor Heineke and Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm probably going Fitzpatrick because especially on a team like Washington, I don't need him to save the day for me every time. I just need him not to lose me a ton of games. And let's be realistic. Washington won the division with Drew Haskins, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, and Alex Smith all starting games. What a dumpster fire that was. And you won the division. Now you got a guy in Fitzpatrick who is way more stable situation than any of those guys when they were playing. So if I'm Washington, I'm welcoming him with open arms. But if I'm Fitzpatrick, I also look at Philadelphia and I say, you know what? I don't really know if I want to go there or not. So don't read too much into, oh, the Eagles can't get a backup quarterback. Oh, the Eagles, they're not a part of free agency. What are they doing? So, I have my cousin. He texted me the other day, and he says, he makes this comment. He says, what are the Eagles doing? And he's like, they're not doing it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, they haven't done anything yet. And I said, well, they're one of 10 teams that haven't got involved in free agency yet. A lot of people in the NFL are not. And he was like, okay, well, I feel better now. But obviously, you see the whole world jumping up and down. They go nuts. By the way, a little more Eagles news for you. Marquise Goodwin, who opted out of his deal last year, opted out of playing last year, I should say. He is no longer an Eagle either. According to Mike Garafolo, Marquise Goodwin has reverted back to the 49ers from the Eagles per today's transaction wire. That's an interesting situation. So keep an eye on that situation, how exactly that happened. We'll get you any updates when they come about. But Marquise Goodwin will not be an Eagle either next year. He's going back to the 49ers, apparently. So he opted out last year, and now he's not even going to be an Eagle this year. So with that Marquise Goodwin. But back to the quarterback situation. Don't get it twisted about what is going on. Because as Andrew DeCecco pointed out earlier on Football at 4, the Eagles can be a part of the second wave in NFL free agency. And by the way, the last time they were part of a second wave of free agency, they didn't do too bad.
For the second wave, I do anticipate them being active and being able to plug a hole with some one-year prove-it-deal type players, such as a Tyrell Williams, who has some history with Nick Sirianni, maybe a Malik Hooker, the safety who's coming off a torn Achilles. You can get these guys probably on some, some low-cost deals, and they do have some upside. So I would look for players like that, kind of like what you saw in 2017 in the late stages when they got LeGarrette Blount, Patrick Robinson, Chris Long, and some of those guys.
So the Eagles can wait this out. They don't have to jump in feet first with everybody else. You do have a chance out there, right? So I think that when you get down to it, when it comes to the Eagles, whether it's backup quarterback, whether it's safety, whether it's whatever, you just heard some interesting names there. Look, Malik Hooker, when he came out of college, he was supposed to be this superstar safety. And then he ripped up his knee. And some people argued that he came back too soon. Well, if he came back too soon, and I'm just conjecturing right here, then maybe with some time and development and re-healing, he can be the stud that he was supposed to be coming out of college for the Eagles. Tyrell Williams was a guy who had a down year because of some nagging injuries last year with the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost called them the Oakland Raiders, but the point is they're still in Vegas. But the point is he used to be on the Raiders. He was in San Diego, now Los Angeles Chargers. Too many teams moving. With Sirianni and Steichen. Remember, Steichen's been with the Chargers organization for like 10 years now. So there are guys the Eagles can add in free agency. Don't sweat them not getting the first guy available. They can still get some guys. It just won't be Brissett, Taylor, Fitzmagic. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Also, we'll check in on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as you watch the show at 973 ESPN. Josh Hennig live at the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, Matt Black Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Coming up in about 15 minutes from now, Kevin McCormick will join us live from the center with the latest on the Sixers. Doc Rivers speaking to the media as of right now. We'll get you the full update in the slate from Doc about the Sixers game tonight at 8 p.m. right here. Tom McGinnis on the call on 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget all of our Sixers coverage from Kevin McCormick, Paul Hudrick, Jason Blevins. The best Sixers coverage on planet Earth is right there at 97.3 ESPN.com in the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get more into the Sixers in about 10 minutes from now with Kevin McCormick, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers writer. Currently, Doc Rivers is speaking to the media. We'll get a couple texts, a couple comments as we watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So just a little a clarification on the Marquise Goodwin news. If you didn't hear, Marquise Goodwin is not an Eagle anymore. So Field Yates clarifies this. Marquise Goodwin is reverting back to the 49ers because per the terms of the trade made last year, this will likely be just a procedural move as it's unlikely Goodwin fits into San Francisco's wide receiver plans. So basically, he's no longer the Eagles' responsibility. So I'm assuming that's going to save them money on the cap, actually. So this procedural move will actually theoretically save the Eagles some money. Let me just, I'm trying to, all right. So the Eagles right now are roughly needing to be about $9 million until they get to, till they get the cap compliance. All right, now we're gonna do a little quick math here, but I'm gonna assume the Marquise Goodwin saved them at least a couple million, right? I mean, this news is okay. So he would have counted for about $4.5 million. So if he would have counted for $4.5 million, and you're $8.5 million under the cap, then technically that money hit becomes the 49ers' problem now, which means you only now have $4 million to go. Talk about a procedural move that just saved you money. Good grief. Now, Kyle asked the interesting question on YouTube right now. Kyle Dubray says over here on YouTube, he says, do we get our pick back for Goodwin? I know it was a swap, but still. Kyle, I'm assuming that by what Field Yates is saying, that per the terms of the agreement, he's reverting back, that maybe the teams agreed to undo the swap somehow, or maybe there was some other language in the agreement that said if Goodwin doesn't play X number of games, that the Eagles can just send him back, almost like a player to be named later kind of thing. Again, this is just coming out, but I would assume that there is some specific language. But this could potentially save you about $4.5 million. That's some serious cash right there. That's some serious cash. By the way, Kyle asked a good question. I'm going to get to Kyle's other question in just a moment. But I do got a comment on the text board I got to get to, all right? Because we're talking about the quarterbacks and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Dan EHT commented on the text board at 609-403-0973. He says, Fitzpatrick will win a Super Bowl with Washington football team. Not. This is a typical Snyder move. That's why they're dysfunctional compared to the Eagles. So first of all, I don't think this is a Snyder move. I think this is a Ron Rivera move. Remember, Ron Rivera is basically in charge of personnel. And he has Marty Herney, he used to be the GM in Carolina, who now joins him in Washington starting this offseason. So to me, this screams Rivera. Rivera loves veteran quarterbacks. He's always been a guy who wants a veteran, stable quarterback. Remember, the only reason why Rivera was happy with Cam was because he was number 1 overall pick. Rivera has a long history of wanting his backups to be veterans. He was very unhappy years ago when they drafted Jimmy Clausen. He was stuck with starting him for a few games. He was very unhappy with that situation. So Rivera has a well-known pedigree of wanting veteran quarterbacks. So to me, this sounds to me like this is a Rivera move, not a Snyder move. So I just want to bring a little clarity to that. And by the way, I told Mike Gill this earlier, and I'm sticking by this position. I don't care what the Checo said today. I don't care what John Clayton said today. I'm sticking by my guns. And my guns are this. Washington should be the favorite in the division. The Cowboys' defense is garbage outside of, 2 players? You can't win every game with Dak Prescott saving you. I still got to see the Cowboys rebuild that offensive line. All right? I got to see more from Dallas. So to me right now, Washington's the favorite because Washington was one legitimate quarterback away from being a legitimate playoff contender last year. They got to the playoffs with 4 different quarterbacks and a partridge in a pear tree behind center. But I'm supposed to believe that Dallas is the favorite? Oh, just because of Dak Prescott? Listen, Dak Prescott could win the MVP, and they still get the wild card next year. I'm sticking by my guns. Washington's defense is a bunch of monsters. The Cowboys' defense, outside of Alden Smith for a game or two and DeMarcus Lawrence, don't scare me, don't scare nobody. I get it. Daniel Snyder is dysfunctional. Now, I promise I will get to Kyle's comment real quick. We'll get to this before we hit the break. Kevin McCormick standing in the wings. He'll join us to get into the Sixers coming up in just a bit. Kyle brought up this point on YouTube. Kyle says, maybe, just maybe, we're not as smart as we think we are as an organization, as fans. This is coming from the dumbest chatter ever, as Mike Gill said. Listen, here's the thing. It's not that people are smart or dumb. And again, this is just my perspective. It's misinformation. All right? It's the idea that you walk into a situation, right? And if you don't have the right information, whether you are the Eagles or the fans, you're going to be led astray easily. Okay? When you think about when it comes to Howie Roseman, a lot of the stuff out there, all right, is not based in reality. It's people's opinions. It's conjecture. It's, I'm going to find an article that suits my needs. And the same thing with the Eagles. If you hire a scout and that scout walks in the room and he says, you can't miss on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, all right? We have heard reports that the guy who is the scout for the Pac-12 is one of the most veteran respected scouts in the Eagles organization. If that's the case, and that's the guy that scouted Zach Ertz, if he's telling me J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is legit, what am I supposed to think? If my doctors are telling me that DK Metcalf is injury prone and he is a guy that might not be healthy, I got to go with the information I have. So sometimes we have a perspective on things in general, and it might not be based in the right information. So just keep that in mind the next time we have these conversations. But Kyle, I appreciate you being thought-provoking. I know there was more to your question, but I only had a little bit of time to get to it. So I was kind of just directing it in a certain direction. So forgive me. We'll get to more of this stuff later. Kevin McCormick is waiting for us. Doc Rivers spoke. What do you have to say about the Sixers? Sixers back in action tonight versus the Knicks on 97.3 ESPN at 8 o'clock tonight. Kevin McCormick, our Sixers writer for 97.3 ESPN.com, live from the center next. You're on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here in the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We're going to head up to the center. Chat with Kevin McCormick here. Sixers coverage on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. I think Kevin McCormick has now sat everywhere in the building at this point since the COVID because of all the media being bounced around the building. Kevin was telling me during the break that they lost some of their premier seating. So Kevin McCormick joins us live now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. So before we get into the Sixers stuff, explain to the audience all the different places you have been around the Wells Fargo Center and your attempts to cover the Sixers during the pandemic.
So for the games, we pretty much sat at tables in the lower bowl in like the 100 level. And then we would also have the concourse area where there was kind of like mini tables for a quieter spot to have your own little workstations. And then now they have us up in the club boxes where, you know, the tables are in the seating area. And we also have the back area where like the bar is and such to sit and have a quieter space.
So now, do you think that as more fans come in, are they going to move you guys again? I'm assuming true, right? They're going to move you guys again.
I would assume so. I would think that as they continue to get back to normality, that we would closer and closer get back to how things were pre-COVID.
Now, this will be the second game with fans in the building. I find it interesting because Tom McGinnis mentioned earlier that on one hand, it was like, oh, it was great to have the fans back, and it was almost like the fans and the players acknowledging each other. But on the other hand, it was kind of weird because of the way it's set up. So give the idea for the audience, like where everything is set up in the building.
So pretty much the fans are scattered all out through both levels. Pretty much like coupled in a few seats per, how like pod and such. But they're stationed all throughout. But being here on Sunday night, hearing that roar of the crowd, some of the players said it after the game, it really did feel like it was a packed house. I don't know if that was more just because of we're used to having no fans here or just the energy that's brought.
Kevin McCormick joining us live from the center here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers versus Knicks coming up at 8 p.m. tonight on 97.3 ESPN FM. At Kevin McCormick, he's at KevinMCC973 on Twitter. You want to give him a follow. Kevin, let's get into some of the things that Doc said today. Obviously, he spoke to you guys just a bit ago. I did find it interesting that one of the things he was talking about Tobias Harris, about how Tobias Harris, as a facilitator of the pick and roll, I find it very important for people to remember that Tobias Harris is having an all-star caliber year. Just because he didn't make the all-star team doesn't mean that he himself has not been valuable for this team. And it feels like that Doc understands how to get the most out of this guy better than anybody else. And I think it's been a lot of fun to watch this Sixers team compared to last year, where it felt like in many times Tobias Harris was a little lost in the offense.
I would say it's a mix of two things. I completely agree in that Tobias Harris does look a lot more comfortable on the floor, and I think a large part of that is due to Doc Rivers. Tobias was an all-star caliber player during his time in LA, so it seems like the two of them, they really connect on a professional and personal level, and Doc understands what he needs to do in terms of the scheme to put Tobias in the best position to continue to grow his game. And part of that is just him getting back to his natural position. When last year's roster, you had Al Horford in the lineup as well. So realistically, you had Tobias Harris playing a lot of his minutes at the small forward, while now they've gone smaller with Seth Curry and Danny Green. So Tobias gets to take advantage of mismatches at the power forward position. He gets to get downhill in the pick and roll, and now we're even seeing him continue to grow as more of a point forward role that Doc Rivers has had him run at times as kind of being the primary ball handler of the second unit. He's been handling it well. Him and Ben Simmons both did a tremendous job on Sunday against the Spurs, really initiating the offense and not only getting themselves going, but getting everyone else involved as well.
When you think about also, you said the word ball handler. Let's clarify what that means. We're not talking about ball handler in terms of Shake Milton, Ben Simmons. We're talking about a guy who is facilitating the offense as it's processing into the half court, correct?
Yeah, so Tobias Harris would be, kind of that main initiator who's typically running that high pick and roll and either creating for himself or looking to create for others around him.
All right, so let's get into what this team is looking like, because obviously now they've won 2 straight games without Embiid. Tobias Harris is a huge part of that. Ben Simmons, another solid, very good game the other night. Well, now we're playing the Knicks. And the Knicks, they had a chance to beat the Nets if they would have kept their cool heads and kept themselves together. So what is the challenge for the Sixers tonight against the Knicks?
I would say the toughest thing would be going up against a tough defense. Heading into tonight, New York is currently sitting at 6th in the NBA in defensive rating. They really hang their hat on that side of the ball with guys like Frank Ntilikina. Obviously, they're without Mitchell Robinson now, but Julius Randle. They have a lot of guys who just really pride themselves on that side of the ball. So heading into this matchup, it's not going to be one of those games where you can just come in and roll over on your opponent, because this is a young Knicks team. They're vying for a playoff spot. They're going to come in, they're going to defend hard, and they're going to look to play their game.
You mentioned earlier on Twitter some of the guys who are going to be out for the Knicks. Who are those guys, and what kind of Knicks team do we expect to see on the floor tonight?
So they're going to be without Derrick Rose and Austin Rivers for different reasons, and Elfrid Payton is also listed as doubtful. So they're going to be without a lot of their key guards. So I think we'll see a lot more of guys like Emmanuel Quickley and Alec Burks, who have kind of been maintaining their key guard spots, and obviously just their continued bunch, Kevin Knox, Julius Randle, they're key guys that have really been holding it down. But missing out on Derrick Rose is going to be big for them. He was kind of a key acquisition for them a couple weeks ago.
Well, the good thing is Emmanuel Quickley has already led the team in scoring multiple times this year off the bench, so it's not like they're losing the scoring. I think the more the thing is they're losing the primary ball handlers and the guys who initiate the offense, the guys who are the veterans on the floor. I think that's where the Sixers can attack them with guys like Simmons and Matisse Thybulle. And let me tell you, Kevin, I'm loving what I'm seeing from Matisse Thybulle. This guy is turning into what we all hoped he would be, a 3-and-D guy who makes an impact each night. I think he's proven to us why he needs to stay on this basketball team, Kevin, because he gives you a level of defense that half the rest of the team is just not capable of doing.
Absolutely. And him continuing to grow that offensive game just makes him even more of an X factor. It's actually something I just wrote a column about it this morning for 97.3 ESPN of how, players and Doc Rivers are starting to take notice of the growth he's seen in his offensive game. He's been extremely efficient from the floor. He's been very confident in his three-point shooting. He's been a nice guy spotting up, catching and shooting, and he's just really figuring out how to be anything other than a net negative on the offensive side of the floor. And with that, it opens up the chance to give him more minutes. And if he can continue to be a reliable knockdown shooter, it also creates an option of him running with the starting lineup. And come playoffs, if this team's fully healthy, if you can roll out a defensive trio of Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, and Joel Embiid for extended minutes and have it work on both ends, the Sixers are going to be a very tough team to score on and also still have the necessary spacing to get things done on the offensive end.
Kevin McCormick joining us here live from the center here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers versus Knicks tonight at 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow Kevin on Twitter at KevinMCC973 for your Sixers and NBA coverage. Of course, he'll be at the arena for the game tonight. Hear all the action. Tom McGinnis at 8 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the Sixers is back-to-back games here, Kevin. You know that this team, they have not always played well in the back-to-backs. They've played, but that was with Embiid. Is he playing? Is he not playing? Now that you know Embiid is definitely not playing for 2 games, do you think the strategy for this team is a little bit different when it comes to back-to-backs? Because maybe the idea is we're not wondering, is Embiid playing both games or not? Maybe the attitude is maybe some other guys, they might not play too hard in the first game.
I wouldn't say they're missing the questionability of Embiid playing or not, just because there's been a good amount of back-to-backs this year where Joel Embiid's gone both nights. So I would say the key thing for this upcoming back-to-back is to not overlook the Knicks just because you see Milwaukee on the schedule tomorrow night. Like I said earlier, this is a Knicks team that's scrappy. They're fighting for a playoff spot. They defend hard. So you don't want to see the Sixers come in and just kind of roll over on this game and attempt to save their energy for the more primetime matchup with Milwaukee tomorrow night, because the Knicks are a team that could expose you, although they're still missing, Derrick Rose and some other key players. They still have a lot of firepower. Like you said, Emmanuel quickly. They still have Julius Randle, who was an all-star this season. Alec Burks is the guy that could, get going on offense when he gets hot. So the key thing tonight is just staying focused, sticking to the game plan, and being prepared to not only be competitive tomorrow night, but keeping the focus for the task at hand tonight against New York.
What have we learned about the Sixers after the first 3 games coming out of the All-Star break that is going to impact what they do for the trade deadline?
That's tough. Although the bench unit has really picked things up to kick off the second half of the year, it was one of my key takeaways so far through the second half is that the second unit really does look rejuvenated. And even though they went through that very tough cold spell starting in the West Coast trip, they really seem to be putting things back together. But the focus of the trade deadline should still be the same. I think this second unit can still benefit from getting a more pure type of point guard, and you could still look to upgrade at a stretch forward. So despite the Embiid injury and how well the Sixers have been able to put out a balanced attack with their rejuvenated second unit, I would say the focus of the trade deadline should still remain the same from how it's been pretty much from the beginning.
And with that being said, if I gave you the power to be in Daryl Morey's ear, if there was one guy that you insist that Morey was able to get, within reason obviously, via an acquisition, who would that guy be and why?
That's tough. I would have to say either I've kind of grown more to the idea of going for the home run swing of Kyle Lowry, but in terms of something that's reasonable and can easily be done, PJ Tucker's still my guy. This is still a guy, strong defensive mindset. He'll blend in right with this team. He's a guy you can just stick in the corner with that second unit. He's a reliable shooter from the outside, and I just think he's one of those guys. He'll come in, he'll understand his role, know what he needs to do to help keep this team in a position to win, and just do it on a nightly basis.
I think you've been hanging out with Hudrick too long because he gave me the same answer on Friday. You guys talk too much. You guys are rubbing off on each other. I don't even know whose answer that is anymore. I feel like you both gave the same answer. I'm a little disappointed. Kevin McCormick here on Game Night on 97.3.
He fits like a glove. You can't There's just no denying it.
Listen, I understand, but you both said the same thing. Like, well, ideally, I'd like to get Kyle Lowry, but if I was being more realistic, I'd go PJ Tucker. I'm like, all right, well, I guess everybody's on the same wavelength, I guess. But no, but
Great
Kevin,
minds think alike.
great minds, right? That's what we'll go with. Kevin McCormick. Follow him on Twitter at KevinMCC973 Sixers and NBA coverage over there at 973ESPN.com for all of his coverage of the Sixers and the 973 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, great stuff. Enjoy the game tonight from your perch.
Thanks a lot, Josh. You have a good night as well.
And, of course, our Sixers pregame coverage being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. And don't forget, Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, college basketball fans, it's tourney time, and FanDuel Sportsbook is celebrating by giving you a chance to win big when you bet on the Michigan State versus UCLA playing game this Thursday. Every 2,500 fans who bet on Michigan State to cover, FanDuel Sportsbook will move the line 1 point in Michigan's favor. There's no limit to how good this line can get. And best of all, everyone gets the final spread, no matter when you placed your bet. So tell your friends, don't wait to get on the action with FanDuel Sportsbook. Just look for the Spread the Love promotion and the FanDuel Sportsbook app to start moving the line today. Don't have FanDuel Sportsbook? Download the app or visit sportsbook.fanduel.com. Use my promo code Hennig when you sign up to get involved on the Spread the Love event and bet on the tournament. That is promo code Hennig with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or to play and present in New Jersey. Must wager in designated crowdfunding market. Max wager $50. Payout at -110. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. We have a couple comments to get to on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Here on 97.3 ESPN. Kyle followed up. Now, so Kyle was asking a question earlier on Facebook, and I want to get to it really quick. I promised I would get back to it. So Kyle followed up his question earlier on watching on YouTube. He says, okay, I got to get to the first part. All right. He says, we've had two Eagles head coaches, Doug and Andy. Andy won a Super Bowl without us when we were saying, as fans, the fans were saying that Andy was the problem in Philadelphia. Now, how many former coaches do we have that have won Super Bowls, including Doug? And Kyle, look, I get what you're saying, but the problem with Andy, and I understand there were some fans who were never Andy people. They always hate it, and he's time management, doesn't run the ball enough, all that stuff. But Andy wore out his time. His time was done. There was an expiration date on that. And Andy has said himself that leaving the Eagles was the best thing for him. And he might not have won a Super Bowl if he would have stayed in Philadelphia. Leaving Philadelphia forced him to reevaluate things and become a better head coach. That's what that has a lot to do with. By the way, Jeff Bone and Pookie is asking, so what if we don't get above the salary? First of all, you can't not. Technically, they're already under it. If you believe some of the numbers out there, this reverting of Marquise Goodwin to the 49ers gets you back over the cap. So if that's the case, guess what? You're already cap compliant. Let's go. All right, FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. I'm going Sixers -7 on the spread, and I'm going to Emmanuel Quickly to score 20 or more points. Emmanuel Quickly has scored over 20 points 2 straight games, and he's now done it 4 times since February 25th. Remember, same game parlays on FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Josh Hennig. Have a great night.